You're watching Arise News Hour with me, Lucinda Bowden. Egyptians have been voting in the first parliamentary elections since the last chamber was dissolved in 2012. Authorities say the poll is the final step in a transition to democracy in Egypt, but critics say most candidates are supporters of the current president, Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, and fear the elections are likely to strengthen his control. Adefemi Akinsanya reports.
Away from the tourist attractions and sandy beaches, there are queues of Egyptians ready to choose the 596 MPs for the House of Representatives. This is the first of 2 rounds of voting, and results are expected to be released in early December. It's been a long wait for the elections to choose a new parliament, and many are keen to create a democratic Egypt.
I came to vote to fulfill my duty and share the responsibility of getting Egypt on the right track.
Almost 6 years after the Egyptian revolution in 2011, which led to the ousting of Hosni Mubarak, officials are calling these elections the final step before total democracy in Egypt. But while the new parliament appears to have broad powers, the general consensus is that it will not be able to challenge President el-Sisi. Apathy is high among young Egyptians, and voter turnout is expected to be low, leaving many wondering whether this was the democratic dream Egyptians so badly wanted. Adefemi Akinsanya, Arise News.
Well, for more on this, I'm joined in the studio by Marco Vicenzino, a specialist in Egyptian affairs. Welcome to you. Now, how significant is this election in Egypt? It seems like the Egyptian revolution has gone full circle.
If you like, I would say this election marks the final step in the consolidation of the new Sisi era. What I mean by that is the history of modern Egypt has been largely dominated by strongmen. Right. So you look at the 1950s, King Farouk was overthrown by Nasser. Mm-hmm. So when the Nasser era began in the 50s, that lasted until 1970. Then after that, Anwar Sadat took over, another strongman, autocratic ruler. Then in the early 80s, after the assassination of Sadat, the Mubarak era began, and as we know, that lasted until January 2011. It was at that stage that one would say the revolution began. Mm-hmm. So a whole process began. It was a period of a lot of hope, but also a period that led to a lot of turmoil and turbulence. There was a democratically elected parliament, a democratically elected president. The first one ever was Mohamed Morsi, and then after. But the problem was that Morsi began to lead the country down more of an autocratic path. That led to a reaction. Mm-hmm. The military had broad popular support. That led to the ouster of Morsi, and then began a process of a fierce political crackdown, whereby you have the imprisonment of many in the political opposition. Then you have Sisi himself going through a process of an election, becoming president, but much of that, you would say, has gone full circle, because although many of the faces may have changed, many of the practices will remain the same with the new parliament and with a strong figure.
And let's talk about the constitution, which was amended in 2014, handing over more powers to parliament at the expense of the president. Can you talk us through that?
Yeah, that was done, I think, largely to give a veneer of legitimacy to the new constitution, right, saying that would be like a constitution like any other democratic country. I think it's widely expected that the new parliament, the majority of those who will constitute the new parliament, will be loyal supporters, loyalists of President Sisi. What they'll do over time is transitioning a lot of the powers that the parliament has over to the executive. So they can say that, yes, we had a legitimate constitution, a new democratically elected parliament, and that democratically elected parliament willingly did the constitutional changes to give the president more powers. So we'll see a shift once again more to a strong executive, and there'll be more of I don't know if you can call it a democracy, probably reflect more of an autocracy.
Right.
With the veneers of a democracy.
And within the electorate, there seems to be very much a sense of apathy amongst particularly young people in terms of turning their back on the current political spectrum in Egypt. Why is that? Why are these youngsters feeling like there's little point in actually voting at these elections?
As I mentioned, after the ouster of Mohamed Morsi, probably was the fiercest political crackdown in modern Egypt, and particularly was aimed at the Muslim Brotherhood, the party of President Morsi. And although if you look at the previous parliamentary election, the Muslim Brotherhood won half the seats. Today, they're banned as a party. Many of their leaders are in jail. Some of them are on death row, including Mohamed Morsi. He's in jail. Many of the secular parties who may oppose, they're divided. They're not united, and many of them, their leaders are in jail. Particularly those who actively opposed, President Sisi. And then, in addition, if you look, you have disillusionment with the political process, apathy primarily amongst young people because they see once again. Think you're back to the same practices over again. And with the young people in particular, if you look, Egypt is a country of over 80 million people. Half of the population is the age of 25. So if you're having many of the young people, they're not expected, maybe at most 1/3 will turn to vote for this election, probably even less than that. So if you see the two examples, you look at the Egyptian example of which way that revolution went, and if you look at Tunisia, which in recent times there was a Nobel Prize was given to a group of Tunisians who helped begin that process of bringing secular with Islamists together, one would look at the Tunisian example and not the Egyptian one.
So what is needed, what's required then to sort of reinstall this sense of faith amongst the electorate in this political system?
Unlikely anything to happen soon.
Right.
Sisi is firmly in control. And one, I think the Muslim Brotherhood must bear their fair share of blame for the current failure in this we could call the democracy in Egypt or the Egyptian revolution. They were democratically elected. Like I said, the last parliamentary election, they won half the seats. They won half the seats legitimately. Morsi won, became president legitimately, but they began to lead the country down an autocratic path. And the reaction, the overthrow, had much broad popular base support. Obviously, when the military took over, when Sisi took over, it led down also an autocratic direction. So one needs to put blame. There needs to be a distribution of blame. It's not just Sisi and the military, also the Muslim Brotherhood.
Marco, thanks.